Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So on this episode, I'm gonna make subframe spacer for the Lifted Miata right there.
Hyper Speed Media.
I'm getting ready for Miata at the gaps. So I didn't want the CV axle to break. So one thing we could do to prevent that from happening is to put 2.5 inch tubing between the chassis and the subframe. So it goes right between that and it brings the subframe down a little bit more and raise the body up a little bit more. So the angle of the CV axis is slightly more straighter than it is right now. So a few days ago, I went to the metal supply store and bought a couple of these 2.5 inch square tubing. So they only come with a 6-foot size. So what I had to do, I had to trim a couple of them to make it work. So I measured already. It's about 17 or 18 inch length. I cut 2 pieces off of the main tubing, and we're going to use this to make spacer for the subframe. I don't have any kind of spare rear subframe to do any kind of measurement on it, so we're going to check out the boys in New Jersey and do some measurement and get a measurement for the rear subframe and then install it on the car. Most of these cars are getting part out, put it into better usage. This one is completely stripped. Looks like a Mazda Speed too, completely stripped. Nothing left, maybe a gas tank, about it.
What's up, dude?
Miata Empire.
Yeah.
Okay guys, so here's the subframe and here's my square tube. So I'm going to use the subframe as a template to trace it onto the square tube. So you want to line it up as straight as possible, kind of like that. And here's my other one. Line this up as straight as possible. Now I'm going to use a whiteout, which I got right here, and I'm going to draw a marking on the bottom. It will be right on to the new spacer. And once we're done with all the marking, we're going to drill those out. Also, you want to keep a note that the subframe has this notch right here. So I'm going to probably have to cut a piece of 3/16 metal and kind of lay it down right here. So it sits a little bit higher here and a little bit higher here. And then I could place the spacer right on top. And that way it will be flush and even. And now it's time to use a whiteout and mark the holes on the spacer through the subframe. Okay, so now that the marking is complete, I can flip this over. As you can see, the marking is right here. Trace the hole from the bottom onto the spacer. Did the same with this side, right there. And also I mark it as L and R for left and right. He gave me one of this Miata Empire sticker. There you go. Support your local business, Miata Empire. Just want to thank Anthony for letting me use his subframe. And if you need parts for your Miata, go ahead and contact Anthony. He got lots of parts. So it's been a couple days now. I was waiting for some parts, so I got some parts from Bell Metric Inc. Basically, it's nuts and bolts for the subframe spacer to make it work. So let's unpack this and show you what I bought. Okay, so I bought 4 of these locking nuts and 4 of these bolts. Both are M12 by 1.25 fine thread. And also I bought a longer bolt. This goes directly through the subframe, through the spacer, into the chassis. And you need 2 of these. You're going to need it about 90 millimeters or 100 millimeters. So this is the part number if you want to look at it. Now let's take a look at the subframe. Okay, so here's the subframe and here's the chassis. The spacer is going in between here. So we have to put a jack on the frame itself and then drop the subframe about a couple inches. Just 3 bolts, one right here, one in the middle right here, and one all the way to the back. You have to loosen that and slowly drop the subframe and insert the spacer in between here. But before we do that, we got to drill the hole on the spacer. Now's a good time to lubricate those bolts and then wait for it to soak while we drill the hole on the subframe. So I went ahead and removed the exhaust as well, just to make my life easier and give me more access to the subframe. Okay, now make sure you got your jack in place and your jack stand in place to support everything. And once it's fully supported, now we could unbolt the subframe bolt. Now after you remove the 6 nuts and bolts, there's nothing else holding the subframe other than the tires from falling down. So that's why I left the tire on. And the jack stand is holding the frame up in place. So I'm going to jack it up to get more room to get to where the spacer should be. But before we do that, we got to drill the holes on the spacer. Okay, so before we start drilling, it's good to have a drill press. The reason for that is because these tubing need to be drilled perfectly from top to bottom, because you want the hole to kind of lined up. So if you have a drill press, it's more precise when you're drilling, and you have to kind of like drill right through here into the other side so the subframe and the chassis will fit perfectly. So I recommend you getting a drill press. I bought this used for like 50 bucks, something like that. So they sell them used online as well. So make sure you get one of these before you're starting this. Now after you're done drilling, the longer bolt should just slide through just like so. If it slides through, that means it's correctly drilled. Okay. Now the next thing we got to do is cut a notch right here and cut a notch right here toward the outer side of the spacer. The reason for that, so it gives us room to tighten the bolt here and to put the new bolt down here so we can tighten that bolt. Okay, once I'm done cutting, I want to clean up all these edges right here and over here. And you see the other side is not needed to be cut, it's just this one side. Clean up all the cuts and then go ahead and spray paint it so prevent it from rusting. And I do recommend spraying painting from in the inside as well, because it's bare metal. You want to prevent that from rusting as well. All right, so the next thing we got to do is remove the shock bolt, which is 2 right here. I believe they're 14 millimeter. And this side you have to remove the shield to get access to the 2 shock bolts over there as well. Okay, so even though I jacked the frame pretty high, as you can see, this is how much space I have. That means that I have to remove the tire and then so I could drop it a little bit lower. Okay, now that the subframe is completely down, there's actually more room than I thought it was. So you could actually fabricate everything because you have enough room and you don't really have to remove the subframe completely. There's plenty of room to mark everything and fabricate it from here. And now let's mount the spacer in place. Let's try to do this one hand. Want to make sure all the holes lined up. Okay, all the holes did line up, but I came across one problem. The front stud right here, it's way too long and it's going to hit the bolt when I put the new bolt on. So what I'm going to do is actually probably trim a little bit off of here. There's still plenty of room to bolt it into place, but this need to be trimmed a little bit so I can make room for the other bolt. As you can see, I put the nut on here. So make sure you put the nut before you hacksaw the bottom piece out. So that way, once you loosen this nut, it will restore the thread on the bottom. Okay, so remember the plate that we cut off earlier from here? So you're gonna have to reuse that. So if you notice on the subframe itself right here, there's a little plate that's rised up a little bit right here. So we need something to kind of level that out. So we're gonna use these plates on each end to kind of level everything out. So we need one plate here and one plate here, and we have to drill it to match the holes on the spacer. So we're going to place it somewhere right there, drill a hole, and then you can leave it as is or you can weld it. I think I'm going to weld it just to get it nice and tidy, and it's going to stay on just kind of like that, and another one just kind of like that. Okay, as you can see right here, the plate is welded to the top, and I lined the hole as much as possible. There's the pilot hole on the top, and I lined that to the bottom hole. And then once it's cooled down a little bit, I'm just going to clean up the weld, drill the hole, and then paint it black. And now that it's fully painted, we can now install the subframe spacer onto the car. When you're installing the subframe spacer, make sure you install the bolt on the side first and just hand tighten it. Make sure that lines up. And then hand tighten the bolt on the bottom. Do the same on the other side. Now we can lift the subframe up to line up with these bolts, and then line up the bolt in the middle. Make sure that fits before we continue. If everything lines up, go ahead and tighten everything down. Also, one thing you want to make sure of is to make sure that the shock stud right here lines up to the holes on the top when you're lifting the subframe up. Alright, so I totally forgot that this part of the subframe is raised a little bit, so I should have made a little spacer here to raise it, or put some kind of washer to kind of fill that gap, but instead I'm going to fabricate a little bracket that goes right in between it. So I made these little spacer that goes between the middle bolt. You could also use washer as well, but I made a little slot in the middle so it's easy to just slide it in because I have everything already in place. Now all I'm going to do is just paint it real quick. Okay, so here's the little spacer I made for the middle bolt. Just want to slide that right in there. And now I can tighten everything and it should be level out. Okay, now that the spacer is in place, I have to jack the control arm upward, and that will align the shock to the shock mount. And once it's done, bolt everything up and we're good to go. Also, another thing to take note is that the shifter is slightly lower because the frame is much more higher and the transmission is much more lower, and it caused the shifter to be slightly lower, but it shifts fine, you know, all direction without any problem. So guys, this is it for this video. Hope you like the content. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel to get more content about Miata stuff.
ハイパースピードメディア